some new shocking polling data that I wanted to show. And I mean, this shouldn't be too shocking. The numbers were there, and when you think about it, it was always a possibility. But to just say it out loud, it might be uncomfortable for some in the country. But I have to. I'm sorry, I have to say it. So I was going through this impact research Wall Street Journal Fabrizio Lee poll, right? I was going through it because there was a ton of information in here that I thought was absolutely fascinating, right? And if you look here, you can see the methodology on the first page, right? You can see the methodology. You can see how many registered voters there are. You can see how many by phone, how many otherwise. Great, fantastic. And then you've got 26 pages. Now, there's a lot in here that I hope you guys go and you look at, right? For example, you go to just a random page here. You can get some interesting, like, oh, for example, question 25, renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. 58% of Americans oppose, 33% in favor, 49% strongly opposed. That's a lot. That's a lot more. I guess I would somewhat oppose just because I think it's egotistical, but I don't think it matters. But my gosh, interesting polling data. So there's a lot here that is interesting. Sending undocumented immigrants back to their home countries, even if they face unsafe conditions in those countries, we're basically split in the country, 49 to 49, right? But if you go to the first page of all this data, I think you get some of the funniest polling data. Question 11. Now, here is a list of names of people, groups, and organizations in the news. Will you please indicate if you have a favorable or unfavorable opinion of each person, group, or organization? If you have no opinion or have never heard of the person, group, or organization, just say so. The first one is Donald Trump. So if you go through this data, 35% have a very favorable view of Donald Trump. 12% have a somewhat favorable view of Donald Trump. 47% in total favorable view. 4% somewhat unfavorable. 46% very unfavorable. 51% total unfavorable. With a very high name ID of 97%. If you don't know who Donald Trump is, where are you? Where are you? Now, this is on April 1st. If you go back to February 28th, you can see how those numbers have transformed over time. For example, as it's gotten closer to the election, you could see that his numbers actually improved. And then as you can see, now it's going further away from the election. Now you can see those numbers actually starting to maybe go in a reversal, starting to get a little bit worse. But you can see that there is a gap of about 4 points, which is, I believe, just outside the margin of error. Now you go over to Vladimir Putin. Yeah, 6% total favorable. 1% very favorable. I assume that's Jackson Hinkle and his ilk and those people like that. 5% very. 82% very unfavorable and somewhat unfavorable. 82% in total unfavorable. Then you get to Zelensky. 47% favorable. 38% unfavorable. Giving Zelensky a 9-point positive approval rating amongst a plurality of the American public. Zelensky has a significantly higher approval rating amongst the American public than Donald Trump, our current president. This is after the Oval Office meeting, by the way. April 1st is after the Oval Office meeting. So people have had time to see Zelensky, defend his country for 3 years. They've had time to see any number of conspiracy theories and nonsense be pushed online about yachts and real stories about, the Panama Papers or other things that they could have found out. They've had time for it to get politically polarized. They've had time to listen to alternative theories. They've had time to review the facts once, twice, or thrice over. And after all this time, and now after the Oval Office meeting, as Zelensky and Trump butted heads, and Trump called Zelensky a dictator, Trump said that he needs to take the deal. Trump said that, Zelensky and the Ukrainians helped start the war and et cetera, this, et cetera, that, and just led this big pressure campaign. Cut off the aid, cut off the intelligence support, add the pressure. After it was all said and done, Zelensky is strongly, like almost by double digits, by double digits, more in the positive than Donald Trump when it comes to the majority of the American public. He appeals to a broader swath, or at least hasn't pissed off as many people. Because if you look here, Trump's total favorable is 47. Zelensky's 47. It's just his unfavorable is 38. Zelensky hasn't been able to inspire enough rage against him to make him totally unfavorable. Trump has. So I think maybe a better way to put this might not be that people like Zelensky more than Trump, which is true. It might just be that Trump has inspired much more hatred that Zelensky ever could in his own people.